Hello everybody, in this particular video lecture we would like to review the magnetic circuit of a transformer at loaded condition. Actually in our previous video lecture we have discussed the magnetic circuit of a transformer at no load condition. So in this particular video lecture we will review in very brief the magnetic circuit at no load condition, and also we will discuss about the magnetic circuit of transformer at loaded condition besides no load condition. So for analyzing the magnetic circuit of a transformer at load condition as well as at no load condition, I have taken up the case of a single phase core type transformer. Further, this single phase core type transformer is taken to be a two winding transformer. That means there are only two windings which are placed on the magnetic core of this single phase core type transformer. So the two windings of the single phase transformer are named as primary winding and secondary winding. The primary winding is that winding which is going to be connected to a source of alternating voltage source or a sinusoidal voltage source. So we will use this word sinusoidal voltage source or the alternating voltage source in a interchangeable way. That means sometimes we may use the word sinusoidal voltage source, sometimes we may use the word alternating voltage source. However, it's important to make a clarification is that all alternating voltage sources are not sinusoidal voltage sources, whereas a sinusoidal voltage source is an example of alternating voltage source. So nevertheless we will use these two words interchangeably, although we will keep at the back of our mind that every alternating voltage source need not be sinusoidal in nature. However, every sinusoidal voltage source can be termed as an alternating voltage source. So how we define these two windings of the transformer which are placed on the magnetic core of the transformer? These two windings we are naming or calling as primary winding and secondary winding. The basis for naming this winding is that the winding which will be connected to a source of energy. Source of energy means a voltage source. Rather, we should say sinusoidal voltage source. So that winding which is connected to a source of voltage, that is your sinusoidal voltage source, that winding will be termed as primary winding. So primary winding is that winding which is connected to a sinusoidal voltage source. So that primary winding being connected to the sinusoidal voltage source will receive electrical energy from the sinusoidal voltage source, and with the help of this magnetic core of the transformer, what will happen? The energy which was given as input to the primary winding will be transferred to another winding which is termed as secondary winding. Secondary winding is something which will be connected to an load. By load here we mean electrical load. So secondary winding will be connected to a load. Usually the load will be a electrical load, and the two windings in question, that is primary and secondary winding, they are electrically isolated. That means there is no electrical connection between them, but they are wound on a common magnetic core. So since the two windings, the primary and secondary windings, are wound on a common magnetic core, so what happens? They are magnetically coupled, although they are electrically isolated. So this magnetic coupling between the primary and secondary winding is taking place because both primary and secondary winding are wound along a magnetic core which is common to both of them. So that's why they are magnetically coupled through a flux which is named as mutual flux, and the path of the mutual flux is through the transformer magnetic core. Now, so we have defined in a way that how to identify which winding will be primary winding and which winding will be secondary winding. Primary winding is that winding which is connected to a sinusoidal voltage source, Voltage source means source of energy, whereas secondary winding will be connected to a load. The load is actually an electrical load, like it can be a inductor load. I mean to say the load can be inductive, like an induction furnace, or it can be your resistive load, like it can be your lighting lamps, etc. Now let us then make ourselves familiar with these two diagrams which are drawn. Actually, I have tried to draw the representation of a single phase core type transformer, and this single phase core type transformer is further assumed to be a two winding transformer. As I was saying earlier, the two windings of the transformer are named as primary and secondary winding. Although you may dispute, or rather you may say that why use the word primary and secondary, because these words primary and secondary will have their meaning as long as they are in working condition. I mean to say the transformer is in working condition or the transformer is operating. If the transformer is not operating, in that scenario voltage source, alternating voltage source will not be connected to the primary winding. So if the alternating voltage source is not connected to the primary winding because the transformer is not in operation, then you are unable to identify, you cannot identify which winding is a primary winding, because the very basis of defining a winding to be a primary winding was that the primary winding will be connected to an alternating voltage source or sinusoidal voltage source. But if the transformer is not in operation, if it is not operating, then no voltage source will be connected, so you cannot identify which winding is a primary winding. And likewise, if the transformer is not energized, then there is no question of transfer of electrical energy from one circuit to another circuit, because there is no voltage source connected. So voltage source is not connected means source of energy is not connected, and if source of energy is not connected, then there is no question of transfer of electrical energy from one circuit to another circuit. That means load will be also not there. So if load is also not there, you cannot mark which winding is a secondary winding. So in this event, people use another term which are named as low voltage winding and high voltage winding. So low voltage winding are characterized by less number of turns compared to high voltage winding, and the area of cross section of the low voltage winding will be much thicker. That means the area of cross section of the low voltage winding will be larger compared to the area of cross section of the high voltage winding, whereas high voltage winding is characterized by more number of turns as compared to low voltage winding, and the area of cross section of the high voltage winding is very smaller compared to the area of cross section of the low voltage winding, because high voltage winding has to carry less current compared to the low voltage winding. Because you know that in a transformer there is a transfer of electrical energy. So if you ignore all the losses in the transformer, then whatever input power is given to the primary winding, the same power should be available across the secondary winding if we ignore the losses. So that means the product of voltage and current on one winding, let's say the primary winding, and the product of voltage and current on the secondary winding, they should be equal. So with that you can equate and you can conclude that the low voltage winding will have higher value of current, whereas high voltage winding will have less value of current. Now let us begin with the topic of discussion, that this particular lecture is dedicated to discuss the magnetic circuit of a transformer at loaded condition, especially because in our previous lecture we have done for no load condition. But before that, you allow me to make some elaboration on the diagram which is drawn, so that it's easier for us to communicate. So you see here, over here, this is the magnetic core of the transformer. So you can see the magnetic core is laminated so as to minimize the eddy current loss, because eddy current loss is proportional to square of the thickness of the lamination. So we have laminated the transformer core. So this portion of the transformer is known as yoke. This portion of the transformer is also known as yoke. So this may be called as the bottom yoke, This may be called as the top yoke. And these two portions, this one and this one, are known as the limb or the leg of the transformer. So what I have shown here is that all the number of primary turns are shown to be wound around this limb, whereas all the number of turns of secondary winding, are shown to be wound around this limb. So this is the way we represent in schematic representation of a transformer. Actually, to be correct, I should say that in actual practice, what is done, half of the number of turns of primary winding will be wound around this limb of the transformer. The remaining half of the turns of the primary winding, will be wound across this limb. The same thing is done for the secondary windings. What is done? Half of the number of turns of secondary winding will be wound across this limb of the transformer. The remaining half of the number of turns of secondary winding will be wound across this limb. So what is done in actual practice? That half of the turns of both primary winding and half of the turns of secondary winding. I mean to say both means half of the turns of both primary winding as well as secondary winding are placed on these two limbs. So what is shown here actually is not going with the actual practice which is followed. So that's why I am using the word that it is a schematic representation. So in schematic representation we indicate all the number of primary turns are placed around this limb and all the number of turns of secondary winding are placed around this limb. But in actual practice, half of the number of turns of primary winding are placed along this limb and the remaining half of the number of turns of primary winding are placed along this limb. The same thing goes for secondary winding. Half of the number of turns of secondary winding are placed along this limb, remaining half of the secondary winding are placed along this limb. This is done so as to minimize the leakage flux. However, in our schematic representation we are showing in this way. So the primary winding is denoted by P and it is having N1 number of turns and it is wound across this limb. The secondary winding is having N2 number of turns and it is denoted by S for secondary, and it is wound across this limb of the transformer. Now in this diagram also you can see the same thing is there, except for one difference is that around this limb secondary windings are not shown to be wound. So indeed I should admit that there will be a secondary winding or there will be another coil which will be wound across this limb, but that is not indicated here so as to keep the diagram neat and visible. And actually I wanted to avoid any kind of clumsy representation, so that's why I have not indicated secondary winding around this limb, but I do admit that there will be a secondary winding across this limb also, but that is not shown here so as to keep the things neat and clean and it is not getting clumsy. However, you can find it here that the secondary coils are shown here. Now what I want to stress is that if the number of turns of the primary winding is N1, then we will have N1 number of conductors, N1 number of primary conductors in this portion of the transformer. This rectangular portion of the transformer, is known as transformer window. So this rectangular portion of the transformer, is known as transformer window. So in this transformer window, the primary winding is having N1 number of conductors and likewise secondary winding is having N2 number of conductors. Now let me demonstrate in a way which will be more or less acceptable. Is that, let us take this to be the limb around which the primary turns are placed. So you see here the limb of the transformer, that means this one, is being represented by this thing for the moment, and these are representing the primary coil. So primary coil is being placed through this point and it is wound like this. Let me wound it so that it is visible. So you see here, I have tried to place, if you count, see, if you simply count that I have tried to place two number of turns, I have tried to place two number of turns. So you can just compare this one, you can compare this with this limb of the transformer. So I have placed two number of turns here. Okay, so if I look on this side, so you just imagine that these things are being cut, these things have been cut by this plane. So I am imagining a plane, the plane is cutting this thing like this vertically downward, so these things will be cut. I repeat what I am saying, I repeat that you assume that there is a vertical plane and that vertical plane is cutting this thing from top to bottom. So these coils would be also cut on this side as well as on this side. So if these coils are cut by a vertical plane which is moving from top to bottom, then if these coils are cut, you will see a circle here, you will see a circle here. So now how many circles you will see? You will see one circle here and you will see one circle here. So that means you are getting two conductors beside the limb. So here also we will get two conductors beside the limb, because it is having how many turns? It is having two turns, two number of turns. So likewise, if I place say one more turn, let me place it say like this. So if I am placing three turns like this, so obviously if three number of turns are there, in that case the number of conductors on this side would be 3, 1, 2, 3. So that is what I have indicated here, that if the primary coil P is having N1 number of turns, then number of conductors in the transformer window belonging to the primary coil will be N1. In a similar way, you can say that if the number of turns of the secondary coil is N2, if the number of turns of secondary coil is N2, so obviously in the transformer window, the number of conductors belonging to secondary turns will be N2. So simply speaking, whatever is the number of turns, that will be actually the number of conductors for that winding in the transformer window. For example, the primary winding P is having, for example, the primary winding P is having N1 number of turns, so it is having N1 number of conductors belonging to primary winding in the transformer window. Likewise, secondary winding has got, secondary winding S is having N2 number of turns, so the number of conductors belonging to secondary winding, number of conductors belonging to secondary winding in the transformer window will be N2, because N2 is the number of turns of secondary winding, which is I have tried to indicate with this small demo which I have showing once more. If you have missed, is that this is the core of the transformer. Let's say limb, to be specific, this is the limb, and around this limb the windings are placed. So in this particular limb, you can see there are three turns, one turn, two turn, three turns. So if I cut it by a plane which is passing from the top and going down the vertical, so these windings will be also cut. So we will have one conductor here, one conductor here, one conductor here. So how many conductors? 1, 2, 3. But what was the number of turns? 3 turns. So that's what I am saying, that if it is having 3 number of turns, the winding is having 3 number of turns around the limb, then the number of conductors on this side of the limb will be 3. On this side of the limb also the number of conductors will be 3. So that is what here is indicated, that the primary coil P is having N1 number of turns, so it will have N1 number of conductors in the transformer window belonging to primary coil. And the same thing goes for secondary coil S, which is having N2 number of turns, so there will be N2 number of conductors belonging to secondary coil in the transformer window. Now once we have made ourselves familiar with this, then now let us think of the equivalent magnetic circuit which we can draw. Actually, for drawing the magnetic circuit of the transformer, I have taken the cross-sectional view which you can see over here. So if you take the cross-sectional view of this magnetic core of the transformer, you will get this view. And likewise, if you take the cross sectional view of this magnetic core of the transformer, you will get this view. So you can notice accordingly that here secondary coil was indicated. So there is a secondary conductor, or there is a conductor which is belonging to secondary coil over here. Okay. Now let us think over that what will be the working of the transformer under applied voltage. Let's say we have applied a sinusoidal voltage V1 having frequency F. So we have applied a sinusoidal voltage V1 having frequency F. So V1 is the RMS value of the applied voltage, and it is having frequency of F Hertz. The two terminals of the voltage source are A and D, and the two terminals of the primary winding is G and K. Likewise, the secondary winding is having two terminals denoted by M and N, and the load is having two terminals denoted by X and Y. So the load which will be connected across the secondary windings of the transformer is having two terminals named as X and Y, the two terminals of the load, and M and N are the two terminals of the secondary coil. Now, what is the nature of the applied voltage? Sinusoidal. So the current flowing through the primary winding will be also sinusoidal. So the flux which is created due to the current flowing through the primary coil will be also sinusoidal, because the flux in the transformer magnetic core is established due to the current carried by the primary coil, but the current carried by the primary coil is alternating because the applied voltage is alternating. So in this way you can simply find out that applied voltage is alternating, so the current flowing through the primary winding is alternating, and current flowing through the primary winding is alternating. Because of that, the flux is also alternating. So the flux passing through the transformer magnetic core is alternating in nature. Now there can be two possibilities. You can look at this diagram SW. SW is nothing but the switch. So if you make the switch close, in that case the load is connected across the secondary coil of the transformer. However, if I do not close the switch SW, then it is as good as the no load condition of a transformer, because if you keep the switch SW open, no current can flow through the secondary winding, and if there is no current flowing through the secondary winding, that means secondary winding is not able to deliver any power to the load. So that means what? If secondary winding is not delivering any power to the load, that means it is at no load condition. So that means it is not delivering any power to the load in case the switch SW is kept open. If the switch SW is kept open, then no current can circulate through the secondary coil, and if there is no current circulating through the secondary coil, then the product of voltage and current VI will be zero. So that means power delivered by the secondary coil will be zero. So if the secondary coil is not delivering any power, that means it is at no load condition. So that's what I have written over here. Switch SW open means transformer at no load. Switch SW closed means transformer is loaded. So this switch SW will simply determine whether the transformer is operating at load or the transformer is operating at no load. If it is operating at no load, then switch SW is open, and if it is loaded, then switch SW is closed. Now this particular diagram, if you can look at, you see that the area capital A which is available for the lines of flux phi, the area A which is available for the lines of flux phi to pass is given by this hatched area, which is hatched by this green color. So this is the area of cross section of the transformer magnetic core, and this area A is available for the lines of flux, or rather the lines of mutual flux phi to pass. So this is the area A. Now it is very logical to tell those magnetic lines of flux which is passing through the magnetic core of the transformer as the mutual flux, because you see the primary coil and secondary coil, they are wound across these limbs. So whatever flux is passing through these limbs, they are actually linking this coil P, that is the primary coil P, as well as it is also linking the secondary coil S, because both the windings, that is primary winding and secondary windings, are placed around this limb. So whatever lines of flux is passing through this limb, whatever lines of flux is passing through this limb will link both the primary coil as well as the secondary coil, because the coils are wound around this limb. Coils are wound around this limb. So whatever lines of flux are passing through the limb, that is being linked by both primary and secondary coil. Okay. So now let us do one thing, one more familiarization, that this alternating voltage source V1 is here indicated by this small sinusoidal signal. So this small sinusoidal signal will have two half cycle, one positive half cycle, another negative half cycle. So the positive half cycle and negative half cycle taken together, positive half cycle and negative half cycle taken together is known as one time period T, and this time period T is nothing but the reciprocal of frequency, that means T equals to 1 by F. So if F is 50 Hz, because in our country India supply frequency is 50 Hz, then 1 by F means time period T, which is taking both positive half cycle and negative half cycle. So 1 by 50 means 20 millisecond. So each half cycle means 10 millisecond. So this plus and minus sign which has been indicated here, or the plus minus sign which has been indicated over here, this plus minus sign which is indicated over here can be assumed to be lasting here for how much time? For 10 millisecond. So for 10 millisecond this will be plus, this will be minus. For the another 10 millisecond this will be minus and this will be plus. Again for the next 10 millisecond this will be plus and minus. In this way it will alternate. So I was also saying that this alternating voltage source V1 will circulate a current through the primary coil P having N1 number of turns. How much current? Current Im. So this current Im which is flowing through the primary coil P having N1 number of turns is how much? Im. So current flowing through the primary coil P having N1 number of turns is Im. So this is at what condition? This is at no load condition. So the current carried by the primary coil P is Im at no load condition. So what is the function of this current Im? The function of this current Im is to create or establish a magnetic flux through the transformer core, phi t. So this phi t is the flux which is established through the magnetic core of the transformer due to the current carried by the primary coil P, and that current is nothing but Im. So this current Im is termed as the magnetizing current of this transformer, because with the help of this current Im the flux in the transformer core is established. So we call this current Im to be the magnetizing current. So this magnetizing current will be drawn, this magnetizing current Im will be drawn by the primary coil P from the sinusoidal voltage V1, whether you connect any load or you do not connect any load. This current Im, which is known as the magnetizing current, will be drawn by the primary coil P from the applied sinusoidal voltage. This thing is going to be there regardless of the fact whether it is loaded or not loaded. So the transformer primary winding P will always draw a current from the alternating voltage source, which is denoted as Im, and it is named as magnetizing current, and the function of this magnetizing current is to establish a alternating flux in the transformer core. Now this establishment of alternating magnetic flux to the transformer core is the very integral part of this transformer action, because if this flux through the transformer magnetic core is alternating in nature or sinusoidal in nature, in that case you can expect that an EMF will be induced across the secondary coil as well as across the primary coil, which is given as, let's say E2 is the EMF induced in the secondary coil and E1 is the EMF induced in the primary coil. Now let us make ourselves very clear about this, is that if we write something by small case letter, like say small e1 or small e2, then we take that value to be the instantaneous value. So instantaneous value means it is a function of time, so it is going to change from one time instant to another time instant. So E1 is the instantaneous value of EMF induced in the primary coil P, and E2 is the instantaneous value of EMF induced in the secondary coil S, having N2 number of turns. Now the flux which is being linked by the primary and secondary coil are same, but only difference is in the number of turns for primary and secondary coils. So that means if the number of turns are changed, then induced EMF in the coil will also change, because you know that from Faraday's law of electromagnetic induction, induced EMF E is proportional to N into ddt of phi. So let me write it over here. Induced EMF E is proportional to N times ddt of phi. N times ddt of phi. So induced EMF E is proportional to N times ddt of phi, where N is the number of turns and ddt of phi represents the time variation or the rate of change of flux with respect to time. So ddt of phi is going to be same for both primary coil and secondary coil. What is going to differ is the number of turns N. So if it is having N1 number of turns, then it will be E1, and if it is having N2 number of turns, then it will be E2 and N2 respectively. Now if you want to have more induced EMF, then you should have more number of turns. If you want to have less induced EMF, less induced voltage, then you should have less number of turns. So this number of turns decides whether the given winding is a high voltage winding or it's a low voltage winding. Now you see in this particular diagram, I have indicated one flux which is written as phi L1. So if you observe the path of the flux phi L1, what you will find that the path which is taken up by the flux phi L1 is partly through the transformer limb, and remaining is through this air portion, isn't it? So this flux path phi L1 is choosing a path, or rather it is following a path or taking up a path which is shown by this lines of flux phi L1, which is indicated here. You can find that the path of this flux phi L1 is partly through the limb of the transformer and it is partly through the air portion. Rather you can say that the air is having much larger influence, because if you compare the reluctance which is offered, so reluctance which is offered by this much portion of the transformer core is almost negligible, because this transformer core is made of ferromagnetic material, so which is having high value of relative permeability, that is mu r. So since the relative permeability of the ferromagnetic material is very high, and it is the ferromagnetic material from which the transformer core is built, so this much length of the transformer limb is going to offer a reluctance, which is almost negligible compared to the reluctance offered by the air gap in this portion. You can see from this point to this point, the air gap is much larger, and air is having very large value of reluctance compared to the reluctance of the ferromagnetic core of the transformer. So you can find that the leakage flux phi L1 will be having a nature which is very much predominant with the BH relationship which is applicable for air gap. So there is a relationship between B and H. B means the magnetic flux density, H means the magnetizing field intensity. So the relationship between B and H curve will be same as that which is valid for air gap in case of leakage flux, because the path of the leakage flux is mainly through the air gap. Although this much portion is passing through the limb of the transformer, but the argument is that this much portion of the transformer limb is going to offer a reluctance which is almost negligible compared to the reluctance which is offered by air gap between these 2 points. you see this much air gap length is going to provide a reluctance which is much higher compared to the reluctance which is offered by this much portion of the iron of the transformer core. So this leakage flux phi L1, we will study the effect of this leakage flux phi L1. Actually, why we are writing this 1? Here you see L is representing the fact that it is a leakage flux, so that's why L. 1 is written because it is the leakage flux which is created due to the primary coils. So usually the approach is that whichever quantity is related with the primary coils, they are usually denoted by a suffix 1, and whichever quantity is related to the secondary coil, they are denoted by a suffix 2. For example, the number of turns of secondary coil is denoted by N2, so there is a suffix 2. Why suffix 2? Because it is related to secondary coil. Induced EMF in the secondary coil is E2. Why there is 2? Because it is the induced EMF in the secondary coil. So most of the quantities which are related to secondary coil will be denoted by a suffix 2. On the other hand, if a quantity is related to, if the quantity is related to the primary coil, it will be denoted by suffix 1. So phi L1 means leakage flux due to the primary coil. 1 stands because it is related to primary coil P, and L stands because it is leakage flux. Now, why this flux is known as actually leakage? Leakage is known because it is not following the intended path. So what is the intended path? The intended path of the flux is the magnetic core of the transformer. That means we want that all the magnetic lines of flux should be confined within the magnetic core of the transformer. We want that whatever lines of flux or whatever magnetic flux is created due to the current flowing in the primary winding, we want that all those lines of magnetic flux should pass or should establish through the magnetic core of the transformer. That means they should be confined within the magnetic core of the transformer. This is what is desirable. It is desirable that all the magnetic lines of flux should be confined in the transformer magnetic core. So whichever lines of flux is not following this intended path or desired path will be termed as leakage flux. So there is one more aspect to this leakage flux, is that from the point of view of transfer of energy from primary circuit to secondary circuit, what is needed? We know that transformer is a electromagnetic device which is capable of transferring electrical energy from one circuit to another circuit through the medium of magnetic flux and without changing frequency. So you see, for energy transfer to happen between the primary coil and secondary coil, we need a magnetic flux, and that magnetic flux should be the mutual flux. Mutual flux means it should be linking both the primary coil as well as the secondary coil. So you see, from the point of view of transferring electrical energy from primary circuit to secondary circuit, it is the mutual flux which is passing through the magnetic core of the transformer which is helpful. So in other words, the mutual flux phi which is established through the magnetic core of the transformer, the mutual flux phi which is established through the magnetic core of the transformer is helping in transferring electrical energy from primary circuit to secondary circuit. It is not the leakage flux. So leakage flux is not taking part in transferring electrical energy from primary circuit to secondary circuit. It is the mutual flux only. It is the mutual flux only which is useful, or rather the mutual flux is actually making it happen, the transfer of electrical energy from primary circuit to secondary circuit. So leakage flux is not desirable from that point either, that leakage flux is not helping in transferring the electrical energy from primary circuit to secondary circuit, but mutual flux is helping, or rather it is making it happen, the transfer of electrical energy from primary circuit to secondary circuit. It is being done by the mutual flux phi. So we say leakage flux is not desirable. So we try always to minimize the leakage flux. That's what I have said in the beginning, that half of the number of turns of primary winding will be on this limb, remaining half of the number of turns of primary winding will be on this limb, so as to minimize the leakage flux. The same thing is done for the secondary winding. Half of the secondary turns here on this limb and the remaining half of the secondary turns on this limb, so that the leakage flux can be minimized and you have a better magnetically coupled primary and secondary coils, which is needed for transfer of electrical energy through the medium of magnetic field, and of course without changing frequency. Now, after saying this, let us do one thing, that we take up these two diagrams to represent these two possible cases. You see, I was saying that when the switch S is open, so transformer is at no load condition, so there will be one circuit like this one at no load condition, and when the switch SW is closed, then the transformer is loaded. For that, this will be the circuit. Now, before we complete it, let us think over that what would be the polarity of induced EMF E1 and E2. So, if you find, actually I have already indicated the polarity of induced EMF E1 in the primary coil P. So, you see, the induced EMF E1, I am going to say the instantaneous value of induced EMF E1 in the primary coil P is denoted by this voltage polarity. Terminal G is plus and terminal K is minus. Now, how at all we are so much confident of putting up this plus and minus sign? Actually, the thing is that we have to apply Lenge's law. Lenge's law says that effect will oppose the cause producing it. So, let us try to write the effect and cause so that we are able to find it, that what will be the polarity. So let me write it. So first of all, let me say that effect comes at last. So let me begin with effect. So EMF induced in the primary coil is E1. So why E1 is induced in the primary coil P? E1 is induced because of the alternating mutual flux phi. Why there is an alternating mutual flux phi? This alternating mutual flux phi is due to the current IM, that is the magnetizing current IM, which is drawn by the primary coil P. Now remember, I am doing it at no load condition. This is at no load condition. This thing is being done for no load. That means load is not assumed. That means the switch SW is open. So this is for no load condition. Okay. So induced EMF in the primary coil is E1. Why induced EMF E1 is induced? Because of the mutual flux phi. You can see here, induced EMF E1 is proportional to N1 into ddt of phi, where phi is the rate of change, where phi is the mutual flux and ddt of phi is the rate of change of mutual flux. Now, who has established the mutual flux phi in the transformer magnetic core? The magnetizing current IM. Why the magnetizing current IM is flowing? Magnetizing current IM is flowing because of the applied alternating voltage having RMS value V1. So you have found out the chain which is relating the effect and cause. This is the effect, this is the effect, this is the effect which is coming at last, and this is the cause. So this is the cause. So this is the cause and effect sequence. Applied voltage V1 gives rise to magnetizing current IM in the primary coil P. Magnetizing current IM in the primary coil P gives rise to flux phi in the magnetic core. Now this flux phi gives rise to induced EMF V1. Because of the simple fact that applied voltage V1 is sinusoidal, so IM is sinusoidal, so flux phi is sinusoidal. So if flux phi is sinusoidal, then derivative of ddt of phi is a non-zero quantity. So you have an induced EMF E1. For example, if the applied voltage would have been a DC, in that case V1 will not change with time. So derivative of that will be 0. Or you can say if V1 is DC, then current IM is also DC, then flux is also DC. That means if you take the derivative of phi, then it will be not having any value which is non-zero. Rather, if phi is a constant, if phi is constant, then derivative of that will be 0. So induced EMF will be 0. So that way also you can think over. Now, once we have established this chain of cause and effect, how to be so much confident of putting this plus and minus sign here? The thing is that the induced EMF E1 in the primary coil P will oppose V1. So if E1 has to oppose V1, if E1 has to oppose V1, then we should put up a polarity of E1 will be in opposition, which will be in opposition to V1. So what we have assumed that at this particular instant, we are assuming that the applied voltage is rising and it is positive also. So we are assuming this, that applied voltage V1 is rising from 0 and it is positive. So it is positively rising. So that's why we have put a plus here and minus here. So if this V1 has to be opposed by E1, then obviously E1 should have plus here and minus here. As if you can think over that there are two batteries, although I should not be using this word because there is no battery connected. There is no battery connected here. But just to explain that thing, that this induced EMF E1 should oppose V1. So if V1 is having plus here, that means if terminal A is plus, then terminal G should be also plus. If terminal D is negative, then terminal K of the primary coil should be also negative. So this plus and minus sign can be deduced by applying Lenge's law. Now this was the scenario at no load condition. But what will be the polarity of induced EMF over here for the secondary coil? See, we have assumed that switch SW is open. So you see, until and unless we allow the switch SW to close, there cannot be any flow of current through the secondary coil. So the only thing will be that you will have an induced EMF in the secondary coil E2, which will be proportional to N2 into ddt of 5. So we will have E2 which will be proportional to N2 into ddt of 5. Now as far as the polarity is concerned, for that you have to apply again Lenge's law, but here the application will be in a slightly different way. Why it will be different way? Because we have to think in terms of that how this E2 is going to react with the cause, because we are saying E2 is the effect. So what is the cause? So let us write, if you want that if E2 is the cause, so why EMF is induced in E2? Why there is an induced EMF in the secondary coil? There is an induced EMF in the secondary coil E2 because of the flux phi. Why there is a flux phi? Because of the current carried by the primary coil. So what is that current carried by the primary coil? This is IM at no load condition. But if you close the switch, then it will be no longer IM. Let's say it is I1 then. In that case it is I1. So we are calling this at load condition. Now we are calling it at load. So I1 is the current flowing through the primary coil P when the switch SW is closed. That means at load. So why I1 is flowing? Because of the voltage V1. Now you see, this induced EMF polarity in the secondary coil can no way oppose the applied voltage directly, because of the simple reason that secondary coil and primary coil are electrically isolated. So the induced EMF polarity in the secondary coil cannot directly oppose the applied voltage V1. So what is going to happen is that if you close the switch SW, there will be a current flowing. So that current which is flowing, let it be I2. So that current I2 should create a flux which will oppose this mutual flux phi. So what we are going to write is that E2 is induced because of the mutual flux phi. But we should again write in a different way over here, is that E2 will give rise to a current flow I2. This I2 will give rise to a flux. This I2 will give rise to a flux phi 2, and this phi 2 should oppose the mutual flux phi. Or this may be the way of explaining that if you close the switch SW, then a current will start flowing through the secondary coil. Now the moment current starts flowing through the secondary coil, because you have closed the switch SW, then that secondary coil current will have its own flux, and that flux should oppose the previously mutual flux phi which was established in the core. This is according to Lentz's law. So what you have to do, you have to just follow two simple procedure. First step is that you first be very much clear and sure that what is the direction of the mutual flux, what is the direction of the mutual flux in the transformer limb where the secondary coil is wound. So this is the transformer limb where the secondary coil is wound. So what is the direction of the mutual flux in the limb where the secondary coil is wound? It is downwards. We can see here that the direction of the mutual flux is downwards in that limb around which the secondary coil is wound. So now the current direction through the secondary coil, should be in such a direction that it will create a flux in that limb where the secondary coil is wound in a direction which is upwards. Why upwards? Because the direction of the mutual flux is downwards in that limb where the secondary coil is wound. So the current which will be carried by the secondary coil will create a flux which will be upwards in that limb where the secondary coil is wound. So if you want that the current direction through the secondary coil should be such that the flux in this limb should be upwards, you apply right hand grip tool. This right hand four fingers, especially the nails of the right hand four fingers, should be moving in the direction of the current through the coil, and while doing so the thumb will give you the direction of the lines of flux. So where is the four fingers of the right hand are pointing? Four fingers of the right hand are pointing in this direction. So the thumb is in upward. That is what is demanded by the Lentz's law. Lentz's law says that the current through the secondary coil should establish a flux which should be upwards in this limb, because the mutual flux is downwards. In this limb. So the current in the secondary coil should establish a flux which will be upwards. So going by this, we can put up the direction of the current through the secondary coil in this way. So once we have put up the direction of the secondary, we have put up the direction of the current carried by the secondary coil. Let's call it to be I2. So what is I2? Current carried by the secondary coils when it is loaded, that means when the switch SW is closed. So this is the direction. Now once we have given the direction of current, which should be there in the secondary coil when the switch SW is closed, our next step is to give the plus minus sign for the induced EMF E2 in the secondary coil. Now this secondary coil will be a seat of EMF. That means you can view the secondary coil as a source of EMF, as a source of induced EMF. So inside the voltage source, the direction of current flow is always from negative to positive. So if this is the direction of the current flow, then obviously the current is in this direction, because you can easily find that, you can view it here. This is the limb and this is the secondary coil. So where the secondary coil is starting from? Secondary coil is starting from behind. The limb, isn't it? So you can just compare it. If this is the limb of the transformer around which the secondary coil is wound, so secondary coil is starting from a point which is behind the limb, like this, isn't it? So if that is the thing, it is starting from behind the limb, it's like this. So you will find that the current direction is this. Now if this is the current direction, then you can easily find that secondary coil is a source of EMF. And inside the voltage source, current flows from negative terminal to positive terminal. So M will be negative, N will be positive. Because inside the voltage source, current moves from negative to positive. What about the load resistance RL? Load resistance RL, this is the current I2, this is the current I2. Now, you know that for a resistive load, current will flow from higher potential to lower potential. So this will be my higher potential, this will be my lower potential. So current flows from higher to lower potential in case of resistance. So what is the load connected across the secondary coil? Load connected across the secondary coil is a resistance, and it is showing that current is flowing from higher potential to lower potential. So this is the direction of the current through the secondary coil. Okay. Now we will then analyze these two magnetic circuits which are taken by taking the cross-sectional view of this schematic diagram. So let me erase this portion so that we can write over here. But we will keep this thing in our mind. What is the meaning of area A, which is available for the lines of mutual flux phi to pass, and the polarity of the induced voltage, etc. Okay. So we erase this portion so that we can proceed further. So you can see here that this LC, there is a term written LC which we want us to get familiar with. This LC is nothing but it is the length of the mean path through the magnetic pole, because if you choose a path which is through the inner periphery, which is through the inner periphery, then that path will be shorter, and if you choose a path which is through the outer periphery, then that path will be larger. So how to find the mean path LC? The mean path through the magnetic pole, you find the minimum path which is through the inner periphery of the transformer pole, then you find the maximum path which is through the outer periphery of the transformer pole. You add them, then divide by 2, you get LC. Obviously LC will be passing through a point which is through the center of the limb and through the center of the yoke. So that is your LC. So let us erase this for the time being. We will keep in mind that what is the meaning of the length of the mean path through the transformer pole, that is LC. So we keep that in mind, and then we actually indicate these two things, these two magnetic circuit. One will be at no load condition, another will be at loaded condition. So these are the two secondary conductors having N2 number of turns drawn over here. So now you see here, regarding this dot and cross which is shown in the cross-sectional view, it is very easy to determine. You just have to visualize the sense of the winding. You see here, this limb around which the primary coil is wound, it is indicated like this. Let me indicate it. So let me indicate it over here. So now let me indicate. So you see here that the direction of the current through the primary coil is like this. So if you take this part of the limb, this side of the limb, then current is entering into the board through this portion. This is the arrow which is indicating the direction of current. So if you take the current direction to be like this, so current is entering into the board this side, so this side will be crossed. Again from behind it is coming, so this side it will be dot. So that's what it is shown here. For the limb around which the primary turns are wound, this side is cross and this side is dot. Cross means current is entering into the board, dot means current is leaving the board towards the observer. So you just compare this to be the limb of the transformer around which the primary coils are wound. So this is the direction of the current. So if you follow the finger is showing the direction of the current. So current is entering here, so this side will be cross, and it is coming out from this side, so this side will be dot. So that's for the limb around which the primary coils are wound. Now the limbs around which the secondary coil is wound, how it is like that? The direction of current will be like this. In this case you have this kind of scenario. So over here you see that current is entering, you can see here that current is entering through this portion from behind the core. So it is going to leave this side. So this side will be dot because it is leaving it, and this side it will be cross. So let us put that dot and cross for the secondary coil over here. So let us put that. This will be dot, this will be dot, and this will be cross. This will be cross. I guess let me indicate once more in case somebody has missed, is that you just need to carefully compare these two things. This is the limb around which the secondary coil is wound. So this green color is the secondary coil and this is the limb. So you can compare, this is the terminal M, this is the terminal M which is shown for the secondary coil, terminal M. So from this side current is entering. So obviously from this side it will leave. So this side it is leaving, this side it is leaving means it is, this side it is leaving means it is coming towards the observer. So this side will be dot. So you see this side is dot. Again it is entering through this side of the limb. It is entering through this side of the limb. So this side of the limb is cross, which is shown here. Okay. Now once we have made ourselves familiar with this dot and cross, we need to stress upon one particular thing, is that the dot and cross which is indicated over here, they denote the current polarity. That means the polarity of the current which is carried by the primary conductors and the secondary conductors, that is denoted by this cross and dot. So cross and dot denotes current polarity. It is not the polarity of the induced EMF. So that has to be kept in mind. Now as explained earlier in this particular video, I have said that there will be N1 number of conductors belonging to primary winding. So N1 number of conductors belonging to primary winding, and there will be N2 number of conductors belonging to secondary winding. Now what is the current carried by the secondary winding? I2. So what is the number of conductors for secondary winding? Number of conductors for secondary winding is N2, and current carried by each conductor is I2. Likewise, each of the N1 number of conductors, of primary winding will carry current I1. So this will be in totality I1, N1, I1. So this is N1, I1. Now let us make one small derivation which will help us in making out conclusion, is that we have seen that the current IM, current carried by the primary winding is IM. So this particular diagram is for no load condition. This is for no load condition, this is for loaded condition. So this is for loaded condition, this diagram is for loaded condition, this one, and this is for no load condition. So what you can make out from these two diagrams, what is the difference? It is very easy to spot the difference. You see in this cross sectional view, which is indicating the cross sectional view when the transformer is loaded, you see that the dot and cross are indicated for the secondary conductors, because when the transformer is loaded, the secondary winding will carry current. So if the secondary winding is carrying current, we have to indicate the dot and cross for the secondary conductors, because the secondary winding is carrying current as the transformer is loaded. What about this diagram? In this diagram, there is a dot and cross indicated for the primary conductors. So dot and cross are indicated for the primary conductors in this diagram, but there is no dot and cross indicated for the secondary conductors in this diagram, because it is at no load condition. So at no load condition, the switch will be open, so the secondary winding will not carry any current. So that's why there is no cross and dot indicated for the secondary conductors in this diagram, because it is belonging to which condition? It is belonging to no load condition, and it is belonging to loaded condition. So that is the difference. Now if you just quickly revise that, the current IM was alternating in nature, so flux is alternating in nature. So what can we write? Phi can be written as phi max sin omega t. So phi max sin omega t, Now what we have said that induced EMF E1 is nothing but minus N1 into ddt of phi. Now why this minus sign is there? This minus sign is there to take into account Lenge's law, because you see, if you represent this, if you represent the primary coil as a voltage source, so how can you indicate here? The applied voltage V1 and the induced EMF E1. So how they are going to be related? You see, according to Lenge's law, E1 should oppose V1. So if E1 should oppose V1, then if this is plus, this will be plus, and if this is minus, this will be minus. So what we indicate here, that by writing minus N1 into ddt of phi, this particular thing is taken into account, that according to Lenge's law, induced EMF polarity will be such that it will always oppose the applied voltage V1, which is indicated here pictorially. Okay, so let me write this in a quick succession. So if you just derive and integrate, if you just take the derivative, then you get what? You get minus N1, then omega, then phi max cos of omega t. Now what can we write further? Further we can write E1 as minus N1 into, now this omega is what? This omega stands for the angular supply frequency. Angular. Now what can we write for cos omega t? Cos omega t can be written as sine of 90 minus omega t. This we have studied, this we can say from our trigonometry knowledge. Okay. Now what is this omega I was calling? This omega is the angular supply frequency. So omega can be written as 2 pi f, because it is the angular supply frequency, that is frequency in radian per second, rad per second. Now sine is a odd function, so minus sign can be taken inside. So what you are remaining have N1 omega phi max into sine of omega t minus pi by 2, because we know that, what we know, minus of sine theta equals to sine of minus theta. Let me write it in a clear way. Minus of sine theta equals to sine of minus theta. Okay, this we know from our trigonometry, so that is being applied here. So this is the expression for E1. Now in a similar way, because you see the flux which is linked by the primary coils, the same flux is also linked by the secondary coils. So by following the same process, it is very easy to derive that E2 will be nothing but simply N2 omega, that is the angular supply frequency is omega phi max into sine of omega t minus pi by 2. So this thing we can easily write after making this derivative. Okay, so this was the expression for E1 and E2. So you see that E1 and E2, they are changing in a alternating way. Flux is alternating given by phi max sine omega t. Induced EMF E1 and E2 in the primary and secondary coil respectively, they are also sinusoidal, except one difference, that these induced EMF E1 and E2, they are lagging the flux phi by how many degrees? They are lagging the flux by 90 degrees. You can simply compare the sine term. In case of flux phi, what is the term? Sine omega t. But in case of induced EMF E1 and E2, what is the term? Sine of omega t minus pi by 2. Sine of omega t minus pi by 2. So you are subtracting pi by 2 from omega t. So that means E1 and E2, they are lagging phi by 90 degrees. So we can write E1 and E2, they lag flux phi by 90 degrees. This is concluded from the equation above which we have derived. Now what was the whole idea? What is the whole idea for deriving these two equations? Basically we want to stress that the nature of the current I2 should be sinusoidal. Why the nature of the current I2 should be sinusoidal? Because you see, what is the nature of induced EMF E2? Nature of the induced EMF E2 in the secondary coil is sinusoidal, so I2 will be also sinusoidal. So that's what we wanted to prove it here. Likewise, the voltage source which is connected with the primary coil P, the voltage source which is connected with the primary coil P is sinusoidal. So the current flowing through the primary coil P will be also sinusoidal. So basically we want to make a concrete conclusion that current I2 flowing through the secondary coil will be sinusoidal, because E2 is sinusoidal and E2 is the cause for I2. Because of E2 there is a flow of I2. Of course we have made the switch SW closed, and the primary coil is connected to an alternating voltage source. Since the primary coil P is connected to an alternating voltage source V, so that's why current flowing through the primary coil will be also alternating. Now let us come to the thing which we want to do. We want to analyze the magnetic circuit of transformer. So for analyzing the magnetic circuit, we will apply the Ampere circuital law. So we simply just find that what is the current enclosed by the closed path. Let us name the closed path. I have actually named it once, so let me name it once more here. You see here I have named the closed path as C1, C2, C3, C4. So let me follow the same symbol here. C1, then this is C2, C3 and C4. So what is the current enclosed by the closed path C1, C2, C3, C4 in case the transformer is not loaded? That means if the transformer is not loaded, no load condition, so this switch SW is open, so the secondary coil will not carry any current. So this is the secondary coil having how many number of conductors in the transformer window? It is having N2 number of conductors in the transformer window for secondary coil, and likewise there will be N1 number of primary conductors in the transformer window, that is N1. But what is the current carried by the primary winding? At no load current carried by the primary winding is Im, isn't it? So let me write it here, Im. Now, what is the current carried by the primary coil P at loaded condition? I1. And what is the current carried by the primary coil P at no load condition? It is Im. That is the magnetizing current. So now, what is the flux? What is the flux which will be established through the closed path C1, C2, C3, C4 will depend on the flux established through the closed path C1, C2, C3, C4 will depend upon the MMF and reluctance. So let me write it that flux established through transformer magnetic core flux established through transformer magnetic core will depend or will be determined, whatever you write, will depend upon how many factors? Number one, MMF acting along the path taken up by mutual flux. Let's say phi. The mutual flux is written as phi. What is another path? Another portion? Reluctance offered to mutual flux. Reluctance offered to mutual flux by transformer magnetic core by transformer magnetic core So these are the two factors which will determine that how much flux is established through the transformer magnetic core. What are they? Flux established through the transformer magnetic core. Flux established through the transformer magnetic core will depend upon MMF acting along the path taken up by the mutual flux phi and reluctance offered to the mutual flux by the transformer magnetic core. But after saying these two things, we should again think over that what we have learned in our earlier lecture. If you remember, in our earlier lecture we have learned that the flux in the transformer magnetic core is fixed by, or rather it is decided by the RMS value of the applied voltage V1, the frequency of the applied voltage, that is F, and the number of turns of the coil to which the sinusoidal voltage source is connected. So we will keep this thing in mind. Obviously this is a very basic thing, that flux established through the transformer magnetic core will depend upon two factors: MMF acting along the path which is taken up by the mutual flux phi and reluctance offered to the mutual flux by the transformer magnetic core. Actually, instead of saying these two lines, we can simply write flux equals to magnetomotive force, that is MMF, divided by reluctance. So you need not say this much. Rather, this simple equation will also convey the same meaning which have been written in detail. That flux, magnetic flux is given by magnetomotive force acting along a magnetic circuit divided by reluctance which is offered to the flux by that magnetic circuit. So flux equals to MMF by reluctance. Obviously, when we are writing this equation, flux equals to magnetomotive force, that is MMF by reluctance, we are keeping in our mind a particular magnetic circuit. So this is a very important point which has to be kept in our mind, that when we are writing this equation, flux equals to MMF by reluctance, that is magnetomotive force by reluctance, we are keeping in view some magnetic circuit, or rather we are aware of the magnetic circuit which is there, for which we are writing this thing, flux equals to MMF by reluctance which is offered to the lines of flux for that particular magnetic circuit, and MMF which is acting in that particular magnetic circuit. Okay, so let us now try to again revisit what we have derived in our previous lecture. Actually, that is a very important conclusion which we have derived. So it will not take a longer time, it will take a very little time. We have just now derived that the expression for E1 was how much? N1 into omega into phi max into sine of omega t minus pi by 2. So this is the expression we have derived just now. E1 equals to N1 into omega into phi max sine omega t minus pi by 2. So from this equation, can we write that the maximum value of EMF induced E1 max? E1 max is nothing but N1 omega phi max. But what is omega actually here? Where omega is how much? Omega is the angular supply frequency. So omega is nothing but 2 pi f. So now, what is the RMS value of the applied voltage? Sorry, it's not applied voltage. It is the RMS value of the EMF induced in the primary winding. So capital E1 is the root mean square value of the EMF which is induced in the primary winding. So E1 equals to nothing but E1 max, maximum value by root 2. Since the flux is sinusoidal, so induced EMF is also sinusoidal. So for sinusoidal quantity, root mean square value is found by dividing the maximum value by root 2. So if you put up the value, you will get nothing but root 2 pi N1 into F into phi max. Isn't it? This is the thing we will get by dividing by root 2. This 2 and root 2 will get a root 2 pi N1 phi max into F. Now, we have just said sometime earlier that the applied voltage V1 and the EMF induced in the primary coil E1 can be denoted by this pictorial representation. If this is plus, this will be plus. If this is minus, this will be minus. That means E1 will oppose V1 as per Lenge's law. This we are showing for this primary coil P. This thing is being shown for the primary coil P. So now from this particular equation, if you assume that there is no resistance of the primary coil, if there is no resistance of the primary coil, and if there is no leakage flux, both things we are assuming. What we are assuming? We are assuming no resistance of primary coil. No resistance of primary coil. This is one assumption we are making. What is the another assumption? What is the another assumption? Another assumption is that no leakage flux. No leakage flux. So once we assume these two, that there is no resistance of the primary coil and there is also no leakage flux. So in that case we can write applied voltage V1, that means the RMS value of the applied voltage V1 is equals to the RMS value of the EMF induced in the primary coil P. So V1 equals to E1. So we are writing that capital V1 equals to E1. So we write that. Let me erase it once more. So capital V1 equals to capital E1. Capital E1 means the RMS value of the EMF induced in the primary coil P, and V1, capital V1 means the RMS value of the applied voltage to the primary coil P. Primary coil P is applied with the voltage V, which is having RMS value V1, and E1 is the RMS value of the EMF induced in the primary coil P. So V1 equals to E1. But just now we have derived what was the value of E1. E1 was nothing but root 2 pi N1 into AF into phi max, isn't it? So this is a very important equation which we will take use at various stages, that applied voltage V1 equals to root 2 pi N1 F phi max. Now if you do not change the RMS value of the applied voltage as well as the frequency of the applied voltage, and in any case once you have placed the number of turns around the limb, then number of turns N1 is not going to change. So you see that phi max, that is the maximum value of the flux in the transformer magnetic core, is proportional to the ratio of V1 by F. So this thing we are writing from the above equation. You just bring F1 over here on the left hand side of the equation, then V1 by F1 equals to root 2 pi N1 phi max. Root 2 pi is constant. N1 we are assuming constant because once we have placed the number of turns for the primary coil, we are not going to change the number of turns for the primary coil. So N1 is constant. So phi max is simply proportional to V1 by F. So if I am not changing the RMS value of the applied voltage as well as the frequency of the applied voltage, then phi max is constant. That means the maximum value or the peak value of the flux in the transformer magnetic core is not going to change, whether it is loaded condition or it is unloaded condition or no load condition. So this is a very important point which we keep in our mind, that the level of the flux in this transformer magnetic circuit is decided by the RMS value of the applied voltage, that is V1, and the frequency as well, frequency of the applied voltage, that is F. So if you are not changing the RMS value of the applied voltage as well as you are not changing the frequency of the applied voltage, then phi max, that is the peak value of the mutual flux in the transformer magnetic core, will be constant. It will not vary, it will not change whether the transformer is not loaded or the transformer is loaded. So in both the cases the flux has to be same in the transformer magnetic core. So if that is the case, then what can we write? Let us see here. First of all, what is the current enclosed by the closed path? Let me just name it. Let me name this diagram so that we are not making any mistake. Let me erase this thing, cross and dot. This is not needed right now because we have already make ourselves clear regarding that. It is the dot and cross is not the induced EMF polarity. It is rather the current polarity. So let us call this to be figure capital A, and this is our figure capital B. So let me erase this. So this thing is clear that inside transformer window there are n1 number of primary conductors and there is n2 number of secondary conductors. This we have discussed earlier. So let us write it over here. So this is our figure B. This is our figure B. Let's call it to be our figure B. Okay. So now for figure B, if I ask that net current enclosed net current enclosed by the path, we have already named the path, it is C1, C2, C3, C4. C1, C2, C3, C4 is how much? It is N1 I1 minus N2 I2. So why we are able to write this? We have taken the convention cross current. We have taken the convention cross current is taken to be positive. So obviously dot current is taken to be negative. Okay. Now in this particular diagram, what is the net current enclosed in figure A? Obviously the net current enclosed in figure A is nothing but N1 into IM. N1 into IM. So that is the net current. That is the net current enclosed in the diagram which is corresponding to figure A. Figure A is this figure. Figure A is this figure. So in this figure, what is the net current enclosed? Net current enclosed is N1 into IM. Whereas in this diagram, the net current enclosed by the closed path C1, C2, C3, C4 is N1 I1 minus N2 I2. Obviously, we are taking the cross current to be positive and dot current to be negative. Although you are free to choose the reverse also. Now, in this particular diagram, the net current enclosed by the closed path C1, C2, C3, C4 is nothing but N1 into IM. Because each of the N1 number of primary conductors is going to carry current IM, that is the magnetizing current drawn by the primary winding at no load condition. So the net current enclosed in the closed path C1, C2, C3, C4 is N1 IM. In loaded condition, the secondary windings, each of the secondary winding conductor is carrying current I2. And what is the number of conductors of secondary winding? N2. So the current is N2 I2 for secondary. Each of the N1 number of primary conductor, N1 number of primary conductor is carrying current I1 at loaded condition. So the current corresponding to the primary conductors is N1 I1 in this closed path, and current corresponding to the secondary conductors is N2 I2 in this closed path. So the net current enclosed is N1 I1 minus N2 I2. Now, once we have written this, what can we surmise? What can we conclude? We have just now said that the flux in the transformer magnetic circuit will be a constant because it is going to depend upon the RMS value of the applied voltage as well as the frequency of the applied voltage. If you remember this thing, I am writing again once more. It was derived V1 equals to root 2 pi N1 into F into phi max. This was the thing which we have derived just now. So applied voltage RMS value V1 is fixed as well as the frequency F of the applied voltage is fixed. Number of turns of the primary conductors, number of turns of the primary winding N1 is not going to change. So if these are constant, phi max will be constant whether transformer is at no load or the transformer is at load. In both the condition, phi max has to be same whether it is loaded or unloaded. So if that is the thing, and we also know that flux is given by what? Flux is given by MMF divided by reluctance, isn't it? MMF divided by reluctance. Now, why I am writing these two equations? Because we have to view these two equations in a way that which should take these two equations together. That means we should keep both of these equations in mind when you are going to conclude. What we are going to conclude? We are trying to say that the maximum value of the flux in the transformer magnetic core is always going to be constant, whether it is loaded or it is not loaded. In both the condition, load condition and no load condition, the value of phi max, the maximum value of the mutual flux in the magnetic core of the transformer, is a constant. Because why it is constant? Why phi max is constant? Why phi max is constant? Because I am not changing the RMS value of the applied voltage V1, as well as I am not changing the frequency of the applied voltage, that is F. So that's why I am saying phi max will be constant. Again, I am also saying that flux is given by what? Flux is given by MMF by reluctance. So if flux is constant, then obviously MMF and reluctance ratio will be also constant. Now, reluctance of this transformer magnetic core is dependent on two factors. What are the two factors? You see, reluctance, let me write it. Reluctance of a magnetic circuit, depends on how many factors? Depends on what are the factors on which it depends? Reluctance. Number one is geometry of the magnetic circuit. It is depending upon the geometry of the magnetic circuit. What else besides geometry of the magnetic circuit? The magnetic material. It depends on the magnetic material. That means, simply speaking, magnetic material means the permeability mu r of the magnetic material. Okay. So reluctance of a magnetic circuit depends on two factors. What are they? Reluctance of magnetic circuit depends on two factors. What are they? Geometry of the magnetic circuit and the magnetic material. Magnetic material means the relative permeability mu r of the magnetic material. So these are not changing for the transformer. So reluctance is same. Also, what we are saying, that flux has to be same, because we are not changing the RMS value of the applied voltage. We are not changing the frequency of the applied voltage. Number of turns of the primary coil are not changing. So phi is constant. Reluctance is not changing. So MMF has to be same. These two things are indicating that only, that MMF acting along the closed path C1, C2, C3, C4 at no load condition and at loaded condition, they has to be same. Keeping in view these things, first of all, the maximum value of the flux in the transformer magnetic core is a constant, because of said earlier, RMS value of the applied voltage and frequency of the applied voltage are not changing. Also, we are saying that reluctance of a magnetic circuit depends on geometry of the magnetic circuit and the magnetic material, that is mu r, the relative permeability of the magnetic material from which the core is built up. So we are not changing the magnetic material of the transformer core. So these two things are satisfied. So flux is constant as per this equation. Flux is constant as per this equation. We are not changing the magnetic material of the transformer core. We are not changing the geometry of the transformer core in both the cases. So reluctance is constant. So flux is constant, reluctance is constant. So once these are to be agreed, only thing which needs to be explored is MMF, that is magnetomotive force. So what we have written just now, you can see in figure A and B. For figure A and B, what we have written? For figure A, we have written the MMF acting is how much? N1 into Im. And for figure B, what we have written? MMF acting is N1 I1 minus N2 I2. So we are writing these two things to be equal because it's very simple thing. Reluctance is not changed in both the condition. Reluctance is not changed in both the condition at no load as well as at load. Reluctance is not changing. Flux is fixed. Flux is fixed as per this equation. V1 equals to root 2 pi N1 F phi max. So flux and reluctance are not changing. So MMF has to be same. So this is the MMF at no load. This is the MMF at no load at no load, acting around the path. Let me write the path. Acting around path. Which path we are talking about? C1, C2, C3, C4. Okay. What else? This is also the MMF, na? N1 I1 minus N2 I2. So it is also MMF. So this MMF is at load condition. MMF at load acting around path same C1, C2, C3, C4. So you see, at no load condition, the MMF acting around the path C1, C2, C3, C4 is N1 IM, and at loaded condition, the MMF acting along the path C1, C2, C3, C4 is N1 I1 minus N2 I2. So MMF at load condition acting around the path C1, C2, C3, C4. So this we have written according to Ampere circuital law. Ampere circuital law states that MMF acting along a closed path equals to the current which is enclosed by that closed path. So in this closed path C1, C2, C3, C4, there are N1 number of conductors of primary, where I1 is the current carried by each of the N1 number of conductors. So the conductors for the primary which are carrying current I1 each is N1 I1, and N2 I2 is the conductors for the secondary. So we have taken that N1 I1 minus N2 I2 because cross is positive, dot is negative. So now why we have been able to equate this? What is the logic behind equating these two MMF? We have not equated this all of a sudden. We have equated from this particular equation, which says that flux is fixed both at load as well as at no load as per this equation. V1 equals to root 2 pi N1 F phi max. Also, reluctance of the magnetic circuit has not changed because the material has not changed. So relative permeability has not changed. Also, the geometry of the magnetic circuit has not changed. So reluctance is constant. So flux is also constant. Reluctance is also constant, both at no load as well as at load. So MMF has to be same both at no load as well as at load. So we have just equated the MMF at no load as well as at load. So we have written this N1 IM equals to N1 I1 minus N2 I2. Now this is a very important equation. This will allow you to make one very important conclusion. So let us find out what is that conclusion. We will again write that equation. Now we will not write any reason for that because we have already talked a lot for the reason. What we have derived is that N1 IM equals to N1 I1 minus N2 I2. So let us keep I1 on one side and take all other terms to the other side. So it will be what? Let me write here N1 I1. So it is your N1 IM plus N2 I2. So N2 I2 is coming this side. So divide by N1. So you get I1 as IM plus N2 by N1 into I2. So now you have a very important equation. What we have done, that we have been able to express current I1, which is drawn by the primary coil P, at loaded condition. So current I1 drawn by the primary coil P at loaded condition is how much? It is equals to Im plus N2 by N1 into I2. So you see that there is one component of current which is extra. So this component of current was not present at no load condition. So let me square it, let me write it, that this component of current, this component of current was absent at no load condition, isn't it? So what do you find? That N2 by N1 into I2 is that component of current, this component of current was absent at no load condition. So this component of current flows only when the transformer is loaded. So let me write in other words, this component of current, this component this component is present when SW is closed. Let me write in this way, SW is closed. So it will give you a physical picture that this component of current is present when SW is closed. This is the switch SW. So when the switch SW is closed, then only this component is present. So this component of current, which is given by this N2 by N1 into I2, is sometimes referred as secondary current reflected on the primary side. Because you see, at no load condition, SW will be open. At no load condition, SW will be open. So I2 will be 0. So this component is 0. So only current drawn by the primary coil P is Im. At no load condition, it is getting exactly in perfect synchronism. At no load condition, SW is open, so I2 is 0. If I2 is 0, then this term goes to 0. So only current which is drawn by the primary coil P is Im, which was said here earlier, that current carried by the primary winding is Im at no load condition. Let me add this at no load so that it is very clear. At no load, this is at no load. Okay, now so what is the physical way of explaining this? You see, this was the mathematical way that you have found, and you have formed an equation and you have found this term. But what is the physical way of interpreting this? This component of current is drawn by the primary winding P from the applied voltage, because the primary winding P has to develop a MMF which will be capable of cancelling the demagnetizing nature of secondary MMF. According to Lenge's law, the MMF which will be developed in the secondary winding will try to reduce the mutual flux phi in the transformer core as per Lenge's law, because this phi is leading to induced EMF E2 and induced EMF E2 is leading to current I2. So if you think that the chain of cause effect, then you will find that I2 is flowing because of E2, E2 is there because of flux phi. So I2 will develop a flux, or I2 will lead to a MMF which will try to reduce the flux phi. But as I was saying earlier, again I am saying that if you do not change the RMS value of the applied voltage as well as the frequency of the applied voltage, in that case the level of the flux in the transformer magnetic core will remain constant, isn't it? So I am talking about this particular equation. This is a very important equation. Again, I am writing it. Capital V1 equals to root 2 pi N1 into F into phi max. So if you focus on this particular equation, this says that if the RMS value of the applied voltage as well as the frequency of the applied voltage, frequency and RMS value of the applied voltage are not changed, then phi max is constant. So if phi max is constant, but what we said that what is the secondary MMF? Secondary MMF is nothing but, what is secondary MMF? Secondary MMF is N2 into I2. This is your secondary MMF. This is your secondary winding MMF, or let me write in short, secondary winding. MMF means magnetomotive force. What is primary MMF? Obviously N1 I1 when it is loaded. So according to Lenge's law, the secondary winding MMF N2 I2 is of such nature that it will try to demagnetize the core, or it will try to reduce the mutual flux phi. So the primary winding P has to draw an extra component of current. Primary winding P has to draw an extra component of current from the supply voltage so as to neutralize the demagnetizing effect of secondary MMF. So that's why this extra component of current is being drawn by the primary winding. So you can just equate this. Let's say that I1 dash, let's say I1 dash is that component of current. Let's say I1 dash is that component of current. I1 dash, let's say I1 dash is that component of current which is drawn by the primary winding. Let's say that I1 dash is that component of current which is drawn by the primary winding in order to neutralize or cancel the demagnetizing effect of secondary MMF. So if that is the case, then we can write it over here. Let me write it over here. What is I1 dash? I1 dash is that component of current which is drawn by the primary winding P in order to neutralize the demagnetizing effect of secondary winding MMF. So what is secondary winding MMF? N2 into I2. What is the current drawn in addition to magnetizing current by the primary winding so as to neutralize this demagnetizing MMF of the secondary winding? It is I1 dash into N1. So we can write what is I1 dash to be. I1 dash is nothing but the same thing which you can see. I1 dash is your N2 by N1 into I2, isn't it? You can just compare it and see. So N2 I2 is the secondary winding MMF which is demagnetizing in nature, and primary winding P draws current in addition to IM, in addition to magnetizing current IM, it draws a current I1 dash which is drawn solely to neutralize or cancel the demagnetizing MMF of the secondary winding. So I1 dash is that component of current which is drawn by the primary winding P in order to neutralize or cancel the demagnetizing effect of secondary MMF. So I1 dash into N1 should be equals to N2 I2. So from there you can find I1 dash to be N2 by N1 into I2, which is same as this one. So that's what I am saying. This component of current was absent at no load condition, but it is present at load condition. Why? To cancel the demagnetizing effect of secondary MMF. So we can also write this for this component. This thing is there to cancel demagnetizing MMF, let me erase this, demagnetizing MMF N2 I2. Let me write N2 I2 so that it is understood that I am talking about secondary winding MMF N2 I2. Let me write N2. So we can view the same thing in different way. This component of current was absent at no load condition. This component is present when SW is closed, that means at loaded condition. Why? To cancel to cancel or neutralize the demagnetizing MMF of the secondary winding, that is N2 I2. Okay, so let it be up to this. Thank you all.